Man, did we have problems. As most of you know, I'm down in Guyana, South America. This amazes me that we're able to pull this off. Lisa, my lovely co-host, is up in Broadhead, Wisconsin. And as we were joking about before the show, Nick is in Minnesota. So we're all scattered out all over the place. And last week, about an hour into the show, we had an electrical blackout here in Guyana that lasted for the entire final hour of the show, right up until the last minute of the show. I actually got back a minute in. Now, the problem was that our guest last week, I had brought him into the show, and so when I got cut off, he got cut off. And so we lost our guest last week, and so we brought him back this week, and we're going to have him at the bottom of the hour. And then we had problems with listeners who weren't able to find where we were because our address for you to listen had changed. And this week we have another change because we have a new number for you to call in on later on during the show. It's 707-701-3325. That's 707-701-3325. And that, if you've been following us on Facebook or Twitter, we have put a different number up, so you'll need to note that. We'll talk about it more during the show. We have a lot of exciting news to share with you. Last week, like I said, we had some technical issues. We trust those are fixed, and we're not going to have another blackout this week. But even if they aren't, it's not going to be a problem because we've kind of worked around that, and we have some new resources that will make a difference for all of us. You'll be able to find the Deloach Approach on several different places. TuneIn Radio, tunein.com. You can go there and listen to WNLM. YouTube.com. You can go there and get segments of our show. Spreaker.com. We're recording now and broadcasting on Spreaker as well, and you'll be able to listen to the show at your leisure there. Even SoundCloud.com. And, of course, you can go to WNLM.com/player. And then we're also working on some other things, iHeartRadio and iTunes as well. So there are several things on the horizon that really excite us, and we're thrilled to have all these new platforms for the Deloach Approach and many, many new listeners. So if you're one of those new listeners, we want to welcome you, and we look forward to a long and exciting relationship with you. I have with me tonight my lovely co-host, Lisa K. Hauser. Lisa, how are you tonight?
I'm doing great, and you sound wonderful considering all of the excitement we've had in the last week.
Yes, there's been all kinds of crazy things going on. Unfortunately, in my life, excitement kind of follows me. I think I'm a excitement lightning rod. For some reason, if you're with me, you can count on having an adventure. So that's just kind of the way it is. And there's been all kinds of things in the news this week, haven't there?
There certainly have. It has been a crazy week in the news.
Yep. Now, as many of you know, we are truly international. We started off our show with a station and a producer that was in England. And we've since moved to WNLM here in the States, which I found out this week originates out of Chicago. I love that. The bastion of liberalism, the bastion of the democratic sphere, and the Deloach Approach is broadcasting right out of Chicago, so I love that. And as I just mentioned, since we're on WNLM, I'm also currently conducting and coordinating mission work here in Guyana, South America, while Lisa keeps the home fires burning back in Wisconsin. Let me tell you, there's been some turmoil here in Guyana with our neighbor, Venezuela. Now, Venezuela under the dictator Hugo Chavez, who died a couple of years ago, became hard-lined socialist. Chavez, you may remember, said he smelled sulfur after George W. Bush spoke at the UN, and he referred to George Bush as the devil. He confiscated American oil and gas companies who were legally doing business in Venezuela at the time, and seized their assets and made their property and made all their assets and their infrastructure part of the Venezuelan government. Well, he died a couple of years ago and handpicked his successor, a fellow by the name of Nicolas Maduro. And this guy has decided that he wants to claim about half of the country of Guyana as being part of Venezuela. Now, this is not a new thing. This goes back actually about 150 years. And there were decisions made way back in I can't even remember. The late 1800s that put the map where it is now. But Venezuela says, no, half of that country belongs to us. And I'll tell you, I remember this distinctly because I remember when Chavez was still alive, one of the things he kept saying was that the reason why he hated George Bush was that George Bush was trying to keep him from his oil fields.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought then, well, that's ridiculous. I mean, I don't know of any attempt that the U.S. has made to keep Venezuela off of their oil fields. But what he was referring to was the fact that he wanted to take half of Guyana because that is an oil-rich area. In fact, it's an area rich not just in oil, but in gold and in diamonds and in all sorts of other natural resources. And so Nicolas Maduro complained in the United States on Tuesday about provocations by both Guyana and the UN, and said that UN Chief Ban Ki-moon had assisted Guyana in their provocations. And so he asked the UN chief for a commission to be created as soon as possible to mediate the bilateral conflict over the Essequibo region. Now, this is not the first time this has happened. As I said, this is almost a centuries-old conflict, but according to the UN, according to the Caribbean Commonwealth, according to virtually any map you've ever looked at, Guyana has always been within the borders that are currently part of Guyana. It's interesting to note that that's on our west side of Guyana. On the east side of Guyana, our neighbor is Suriname, and they are claiming part of our country there as well. And so, but that has calmed down. Now, here's the problem. All of this turmoil in Venezuela right now is a real hot spot because opposition are strongly against Chavez and Maduro and the things that they've implemented. And however, on this issue of taking half of Guyana, almost everyone in Venezuela is in agreement. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Now, add to that mix that here in the last 6 months, ExxonMobil has been down here with a platform offshore in Guyana territorial waters that, interestingly enough, is east of the line where Venezuela says they own, and they've found oil. In fact, quite a major reserve of oil. And so now the stakes are higher, and Venezuela wants that oil.
Well, they're in international waters, aren't they?
it is in it is in waters that Guyana and that Venezuela claim are part of their territorial waters.
Okay.
But what Venezuela says, it's interesting to look at the map, because if you look at the map of Guyana, the Essequibo River runs almost right down the middle of Guyana, and north to south. And this platform is to the east of the Essequibo River. But what Venezuela says is that their waters actually come over and cover a large swath even of the eastern side of Guyana. How they figure that, I don't know, but oftentimes socialists don't need a good reason or a logical reason. They just get an idea in their head, and that's that. So that is what's going on here in Guyana right now.
Well, but this is typical socialism. You run out of your own people's money. You run out of your own resources and the resources of your own people. You have to go looking for more. So that's pretty typical of a socialist economy and a dictator and a socialist government. Hugo Chavez had no problem at all appropriating American companies, American platforms, American assets when he decided that he needed them to keep his own government afloat.
Yes, that's right.
And I see this as no different than that. The problem is Guyana is a much smaller, much less powerful, much less wealthy nation.
Well, that's right.
Than Venezuela was at one time, and actually has probably no more money than Guyana does anymore. But what Maduro is trying to do is refill its coffers. And what's the best way to do that? Steal it.
That's right. Take it.
Yeah.
And here's the problem. Legally, this is probably going to come down in the favor of Guyana. But the very thing that you just mentioned, the fact that Venezuela has a larger army and has an enormous military infrastructure. Right. Guyana doesn't have that. Venezuela has fighter planes and warships and things like that, and Guyana doesn't have that.
And they have the military backing of Iran and Cuba.
Yes.
And Russia.
Yes. And so this could actually become, depending on what happens, if Venezuela decides we're going to go ahead and take it, and that's not unprecedented. There was a offshore drilling rig north of the Essequibo region several years ago, and Venezuela sent gunboats out and made them stop. So if that were to happen again, who knows what's going to happen? Exxon is a huge global country with headquarters in the U.S., and the U.S. would have an interest from several vantage points, not the least of which being the oil reserve.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but I'm right here on the ground as that's going on, and there are meetings this week here on the continent of South America. There's a meeting in Brazil where our president here, it just slipped my mind because he's a new president. He was just elected and put into office back in May. But the local president, David Granger, is going to that meeting, and I think almost kind of uninvited. He's going to try to see if there can be a way to diplomatically work this out. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting to see. Now, speaking of legal. Alan Dershowitz has recently, in fact, I heard him on 2 interviews over the last 2 days.
Yes.
Talking about a book that he has just written, and I mean it's hot off the press.
Right.
In fact, I think the only way you can get it right now is as an ebook.
That's right.
And I ordered that book last night and started reading it. Now, Alan